Hello and welcome to another episode of Euphoric, the podcast. I'm so excited to be sitting across from Jane Ballard, who I've had the pleasure of working with over this last year. And I can't wait to go deep because Jane is just a wisdom trove. Just some of the ways that she talks about and explains topics from the perspective of a psychotherapist is just gold. So I can't wait to ask some questions today. Jane, how are you doing?
Hi, Karolina. I'm doing great. Thank you so much for your kind intro, and I'm so excited to be on here with you today.
Amazing. Tell the audience a little bit about what work you do, and how that relates to being alcohol free and, anything else that comes up.
Yeah, absolutely. So I am a psychotherapist in private practice. I have actually been doing this for 20 years now. I graduated from grad school 20 years ago. I've been in the setting I'm in now for about 7 years, but I've worked in various settings working with, different demographics and different types of mental health challenges. So now I work with a group practice in Dallas called Sparrow House Counseling, and I have two different certifications. I have a perinatal mental health certification and a eating disorder specialist certification. And so I love working with women. I love focusing on women's mental health throughout the hormonal lifespan. So anything from premenstrual dysphoric disorder to fertility concerns, mood and anxiety issues during pregnancy, after pregnancy, parenting, all those fun things. And then recently, in the last year and a half or so, I've expanded my professional work to include working with people on changing their relationship with alcohol, not because necessarily they meet the criteria for alcohol use disorder or have identified it as a huge problem, but just because they suspect that life might be more meaningful and be just as enjoyable, if not better, without alcohol along for the ride. So that's kind of one of my latest passions. And I recently led a retreat in Bali with women focused on that. And I'm just really enjoying that.
Yeah, well, we're so excited to have you in the alcohol-free movement. And tell me, how is it based on your own kind of transformation? How did your relationship with alcohol change?
Yeah, that's a great question. So, pandemic was a little bit of a turning point for me, which I think I hear that a lot. The more people, men and women, that I'm talking to about their stories with changing their use of alcohol, it seems like that was a turning point for a lot of people. And for me, initially in the pandemic, I didn't drink more. I was probably drinking less because I was socializing less. And then I think 2021, I was beginning to feel kind of weary. In my profession, I was going into the office still during that time. I've got 3 kids at home, so I could not do virtual sessions in my house without lots of interruptions. So me and probably one other therapist were going in the office, and people were really struggling. And I think it was beginning to, I don't know, come out in my own life, feeling burnout and just down. And so I started working with my own therapist and worked with him for a couple of years and was working on, spirituality and, finding my purpose, looking at existential questions like, what am I doing on this earth? What is my purpose here? And about a year and a half into that, I kind of had this epiphany moment where I realized, I think that I need to quit drinking. I don't know exactly why or what this is going to look like, but I think that if I remove alcohol from my life, I'm going to I'm going to find a new sense of satisfaction and purpose in this life and a deeper spiritual connection than I would otherwise. Like if I keep alcohol in my life, I think I'm going to hit a ceiling and never really fully reach my full potential, that God gave me. And so that was the fall of 2022, and just kept going from then and listening to podcasts and reading books and found you and have been so inspired by you and your book and your work, and went on a retreat to Bali as a participant. And that's really kind of where it kicked off, where I started talking more about it and, working with more women on looking at their relationship with alcohol.
Yeah. Oh my God, so brilliant, so good. I love your, idea about like there's a level of potential that we're able to reach this infinite level pretty much, but that, alcohol can really block it. And it just goes along so well with my theory that, people who start to question the relationship or get inquisitive or intuitive about their relationship with alcohol, it's actually a bigger sign from the universe that like, hey, we're meant to do something bigger and more beautiful on this planet. We're supposed to live in a more beautiful way. And you have been chosen almost to like share your gifts and share this. We don't have time for this drink anymore, this silly little drink, right?
It's so true. It's something that I've always been really interested in is self-actualization and Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And like, when I was an 18-year-old studying psychology for the first time and thinking, gosh, wouldn't it be great to like get to the tip of the triangle and reach this point of self-actualization and what actually is that? And I don't want to waste my life. I don't want to waste any of the resources that I've been gifted. And and I just don't think you can, I don't know that any human can fully develop every bit of potential and every gift that they've been given if they're putting in a substance that, causes continual setbacks, even if it's to a minor degree where it's impacting sleep and energy level and your mood to some degree. It's just slows you down.
Yeah. I think that's such good motivation. Like if someone's on the brink of wanting to take a break from alcohol, to just see it that way. But then also, we also get in this territory now that the alcohol-free movement's been around for a while. We see more and more people taking long, extended breaks, but then kind of having this waffle, right? Where it's like, oh, I go back to drinking a little, or I drink again this time. So it's like you really need a deep why. And the pain
Mm-hmm.
often isn't a deep enough why, especially if you're a gray area drinker. So it's like that
Absolutely.
real, like you said, existential, deep, like soulful, purposeful why, and if it's like God gave me these gifts and I'm meant to share them with the world and alcohol like
Yes,
impedes that, then like that connects, I think, to that soul level, sense of purpose that we have. But everybody needs to do it individually because we can't just tell people what,
absolutely.
that gift or that purpose is. But I think it's a really good exercise. Like if you've been around the sober curious movement for a while and you're not sure of what your deeper why is, it could be a really good, exercise to do over the evening or the weekend to kind of drill into that. And I think it goes down to the core of like your deeper why, even for life, even for like a happy, fulfilled
Absolutely.
life.
Yes.
Yeah.
I mean, for me, from a spiritual perspective, a lot of what I was doing in my counseling was working on deconstructing some theological beliefs and just spiritual stuff that had been causing some distress. And I was getting to this really good place where I felt like things were making sense and I was allowing myself to let the way I believed make sense. And then I would drink and not even drink a lot, but drink maybe two drinks. And then I would notice that I just felt duller spiritually, like there was almost like this veil that was there. And I didn't like how that felt. It wasn't worth it. And I felt like I'm growing spiritually. It's like I was almost to finding the answer to these questions. And then this veil would come down and I'd be set back and I'd have to start again. And I just got tired of that.
Yeah. It reminds me when you said that when you're 18, you're interested in like self-actualization. I remember getting into Paulo Coelho's work way back when in like college and stuff. And, he has The Alchemist, the book, and then he has another book called, I think it's The Aleph, but he wrote it much later in life. And he was like on a trans-Siberian, journey around Russia or something. And he's talking about like the progress you can make in your spirituality and also in your fulfillment and happiness if you continue down the journey. But that it's like really
Yeah.
easy in life to have these moments of interest and then we pull back. And it's almost like
Yeah.
you never really get that far. And I was thinking back, like, wow, I was actually a pretty precocious kid when I was like in high school
Yes.
and, early adolescence, and then alcohol, right? And it's just like completely it didn't take away all those interests for like they were still there, but like you said, like they're blocked. You're not able to fully go into and deepen them as much. And so I'm curious now that alcohol is out of the way for you in your life, like how has that deepened your spirituality and what does that even mean to you? Like what does that word mean to you particularly?
Yeah. I mean, to me, a lot of it is being able to zoom out from the little mundane details of life and the stressors of life, the things that are relatively small in the grand scheme of things that create a pretty significant amount of distress in most people's lives. Being able to zoom out from that and remember to be present. Remember to remember that this life is actually pretty amazing. Um, unless we are in a war zone or a crisis situation, or we have just gotten a terminal diagnosis, like just being alive today and walking around in Dallas, Texas, and getting to see the blue sky and the sun after it stormed for 10 days, like that to me is such a gift. And I'm not going to allow little annoyances get in the way. So I think of it almost as like being in touch with an infinite source of love. And fear and anxiety, they tend to not go hand in hand with love. They distract us, they pull us away. And I think that when we drink, fear and anxiety typically come after, the next day, or maybe later that day, or maybe while alcohol's in our system. And I think being free from that and continually remembering to remember, you don't have to do like 2 hours of spiritual practices a day. You just take 30 seconds to be present and to remember what you feel like your purpose is, and to connect with who your higher power is, and who, like for you, who is the infinite source of love and creation. And maybe it's God, maybe it's the universe, maybe it's like just humankind and all living things, and just the natural ebb and flow of the earth. It could be anything, but just thinking of something greater than yourself that has meaning and beauty to it, and connecting, like feeling that within you, that is within you, and you are a part of that.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's the best reframe I've ever heard on mindfulness, because that word almost gets like thrown around so much. It's so cliche now. And it's like, but what is it? And what does it mean? And how do you actually connect with it? And it's not, yes, obviously it's be present and slow down, but I think like you demonstrate like a bigger purpose of like why to do that. It's because it will clear
Yes.
the fear and anxiety and doubt and actually get you into that like loving connection. And for me, I'm going to ask you next, like what your trick is. But for me, when I can think of, and obviously this is my own belief system, my own kind of hypothesis, but I imagine that I came here to this planet on purpose, and I decided to come here. And I decided to come here to experience certain things and learn and grow and help humankind in some way. But it was also meant to be joyful and fulfilling and super happy, and all these beautiful experiences and adventures that I have. And I almost think of it as a game, like how fun and amazing can my life be? And like that I'm ultimately in the driver's seat for all of that. And I kind of remember that, especially it helps like get out of that switch of like life is happening to you and all these bad things are just like piling up. You remember that like, oh no, I decided to come here to live a really great life. So why am I forgetting to do that? So I'm super curious what
Yeah.
kind of mindset tricks you do, or is there any like rituals you do to get back in the moment? Let's say you're having a really busy day and you're human and you get super
Yeah.
stressed out. What do you do?
Yeah, that's a great question. Well, I think the meditation teacher, Joseph Goldstein, he has this saying, be simple and easy. And at first I didn't like it, because like I kind of bristle at the word simple, like that. Like, I am not simple. I am complex and intelligent, I'm really not, but like to tell myself these things. But I'm like, no, just like, let's not make things complicated. Let's keep it simple. Let's keep it easy. Let's be light and playful. And part of my spiritual belief is that we are all almost like works of art. We're divine reflections of God, like the universe was created in God's image. And God must be like really playful and creative and loving and deep and inquisitive and curious. And so spirituality doesn't have to be this solemn, quiet, ascetic practice. It can be like enjoying the gifts that God gave us, to make this life fun. Like, I think we need fun. We need friends. We need social connection. We need laughter. We need play. We can't work all the time. We've got to kind of go in and out and have variety in our lives. So to me, that's a big piece of it. And just the phrase, remember to remember, like any day that I'm alive and breathing on this earth is a good day. I'm grateful for it. Even if I'm really stressed about something, or I'm frustrated, or my kids are driving me crazy, or I'm worried about an issue at work. In the grand scheme of things, it's a good day.
Yeah. You have that like written down somewhere? Like you just have it as a mantra now that to remember to say?
I should write it down. No.
Get it
The
tattooed on
remember to
your arm.
remember piece. Yeah. Like I got that from Alan Watts. Are you familiar with him at all?
Yeah.
Yeah. He's like a philosopher. Like he was an Anglican priest, and then he got into Eastern spirituality and philosophy, and I love to listen to recordings of him speaking, and he's got this like posh British accent from the 50s and 60s, and he says, "Remember to remember." Like don't walk around on autopilot. Don't walk around asleep. Like let's wake up and remember to remember that like we're so fortunate to be alive. And if we're not in physical pain or in crisis or grieving something traumatic, we're so lucky. Like how many people on this planet would trade places with you if you're not suffering either emotionally or mentally or physically right this second? And so I think just keeping it in perspective, and I don't want anyone to ever confuse that with comparative suffering of like, oh, well, I can't feel sad about the fact that, I don't know, whatever thing happened in my life. I can't, it's still valid that hard things are going to happen and I can grieve and have emotion about that. You know, it's okay to feel that, but it also helps to put it in perspective occasionally that in the grand scheme of things, it's good. Life is good.
Yeah. And that, like, in essence, in so many ways, like, we have the things we want and we have the agency to change the things we don't want or have yet. And just, even just sometimes the thought that, like, right now, both of my parents are alive, like my husband, I have my dog, like everybody I love is alive. And it's
Yes.
like one day that will not be true. One day I'll be 90 years old and who knows who will be around me then. And hopefully I'm still super grateful then for the life I get to have. But I think we forget all of these little beautiful moments. And so funny, I used to read a lot of Alan Watts when I was in college, like right before
Did you
alcohol.
really?
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
love that.
Yeah. But it's like, again, like what kind of development would I have had, if I didn't have that big block? And obviously things are good, things are fine. I needed that little side road, just to develop even more and have the contrasts in a way. But it's so
Yes.
interesting. Going more further into these some like bigger existential questions. What does purpose mean to you, and how do you define your own purpose?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I think to me, purpose is what is the meaning of your life? Why are you here? And sometimes I think a lot of our purpose consists of trying to figure out what our purpose is. Um, but to me, it's about contributing in some way outside of myself. And, you know, the goal is not success. I think success is a side effect of really figuring out your purpose and pursuing that and staying on that path. And when we do that, we will find fulfillment and success as a side effect. So as far as my purpose, I'm still trying to define that. I love to reflect on this. When I was 18, I majored in psychology, and then I got a master's in social work after that, and I wanted to be a therapist. And, you know, the question you get asked all the time is, why do you want to do that? Why do you want to be a therapist? And the answer for 99% of people is because I want to help people. And I think that's like, yes, we all want to help people. And I think even back then when I was, I guess I was 22, 23 when I started grad school, um, I remember thinking like, I have to make a living in this life. I have to earn money. I need to figure out a way to do this, but I don't want to earn money just for the sake of earning money. I want to do something that has meaning and that impacts others in a positive way and also make money at the same time. And so even back then, I kind of had this rudimentary idea. And so to me, like my purpose is to, I think, walk alongside others and help ease suffering or find meaning in suffering. I think that pain is inevitable, but pain and suffering aren't necessarily, they don't have to go hand in hand. If we can learn how to relate to our pain, and of course, for me, this is always it's a lifelong work in progress. But if we can learn to relate to our pain in an open-handed way, I think suffering can be eased. So through acceptance and letting go of resistance, suffering goes away. And so I guess for me right now, professionally, that's what I view as my purpose, is just easing suffering or helping others find meaning in their own suffering. And then also, I guess on a personal level, my purpose is to really use the gifts that God gave me to the fullest extent I possibly can. And if I do that, even if I can't define what my purpose is, I will have achieved my purpose, because that's why he gave me the gifts, is to achieve my purpose. And, maybe he put me here just to make one life slightly better. That would be okay.
Yeah.
Or to love. I think we're all here to love, to spread love, to give love and receive love.
Yeah. Going back to like how you express like purpose is like a service, like something we give back to humanity. What do you say? Because this often comes up with people that I work with. What do you say to someone who's like, yeah, but like that's not my career, or you know what I mean? Like it's like a block of
Mm-hmm.
like, yeah, but I'm not in that kind of a helping profession. Which obviously you can always pivot if you want to. But
You
how do
can
you
always pivot.
how would you like make like that deeper sense of purpose come from something that isn't necessarily your like 9 to 5 day job paycheck?
Yeah.
If you don't
I
feel
mean,
like you're making a, impact there.
yeah. And maybe it's not in what the function of your job description is. It's not the role, but maybe it's how you interact with the people that you come into contact with every day. Maybe you make eye contact with people you see in passing and make it a point to find out their name and say hello and get to know the people who work in your building. Or maybe it's how you treat your clients, and that you have integrity and that people can trust you and that you're going to be reliable and you're going to keep your word. It doesn't have to be that, you could be a New York stockbroker, but have integrity and treat people with gentleness and be firm yet kind. And maybe that's your purpose, is to be the reflection of God in human form to everyone you encounter, to make people feel seen and valued and cared for.
Mm. Well, that feels important.
And of course, we're never going to be perfect at this. We're going to have bad days, or we're going to be in a bad mood, and we're going to be rude, and we're going to snap at our family members. But I think just continually beginning again is the key. Don't be like, well, I failed at that. Obviously, I'm not a good person. I'm not kind. Or, even if you don't have the trait of kindness, you can cultivate the state of kindness continually as a practice.
Yeah, I love that. Going into like easing suffering, what do you see as some of the number one issues that women bring to you in your practice?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think that a really common one is anxiety, and lack of, sometimes maybe I'm about to say lack of purpose, like, feeling like women get to a certain point in their lives and they're like, this is what I've always wanted, and I thought when I got to this place I would be fulfilled, yet I'm not. And so figuring out, like, what can they do? What's the solution to this? How do they find meaning and purpose? And what's the difference between finding fulfillment and contentment and purpose and drive and happiness? Like, I think we confuse that. Like, I'm not happy, therefore something's wrong. And maybe we're chasing the wrong thing. I think that happiness is fleeting and it comes and goes. Russ Harris wrote a book called The Happiness Trap. And he starts out the very first chapter, maybe the first line in the book is like, you know, if you're struggling with depression or anxiety, the solution is not to get rid of the depression or the anxiety. The solution is to realize that life is full of pain and disappointment, and it's how we relate to that. And we can adjust our expectations and find meaning and beauty even in the hard stuff. Mm-hmm. So, long answer to say anxiety, kind of just feeling like you're on autopilot and disconnected and exhausted. I have so many women who are moms of young kids, or they're working, or both. And I think feeling like they're just going constantly and have very little time to even explore what their meaning or their purpose might be. And then I think there's also a huge pull for women to look a certain way in our culture. And I think there has been a lot of improvement in the last 10, 20 years. But I think traditionally women have felt like I have to look this way in order to have value, in order to find a life partner, in order to attract someone, in order to be taken seriously at my job. I have to fit into this mold. And so I think a lot of women struggle with just not valuing themselves based on what, those more intangible characteristics they have, and really struggling with body image and self-criticism. And, a lot of times people get distracted in changing their appearance by eating a certain way and exercising and having this clean lifestyle. And that can in itself become a huge distraction to really identifying what is important in life. Like when you're 80, are you going to be like, oh, I'm so proud of myself that I, eliminated sugar and processed foods for, the whole decade of my 30s. Like that may not be what you are super, proud of or remembering with fondness. That maybe experiences would be something that you would value more, or risks that you took, or people that you connected with.
Mm. So if you had a client that was coming to you with body image issues, like what would be your philosophy around that? And then also like, what are some of the solutions?
Yeah, that's a great question. So the first thing I would want to do is to normalize and validate her experience. I mean, I've been there myself many, many times off and on throughout my life, and I'm sure I will be there again where, I'm feeling distressed about the way my body looks. And so I would want to be very gentle and normalize and validate that experience. And then I would want to help her consider self-compassion, and also get to know, like, what are the thoughts that she's regularly thinking about herself, and what is the dialogue that's almost automatically going through her mind that she may not be even fully aware of, but she just realizes she feels a lot of distress or self-loathing or anxiety or dread, or she's avoiding going to the pool with friends because she doesn't want to wear a bathing suit, those kinds of things. So self-compassion. And then I think that one of the concepts I love to present to people is this idea of body neutrality, and trying to have a realistic goal for how you want to relate to your body. And, maybe body positivity or loving your body. We hear a lot about that sometimes in popular culture. And maybe that feels like ridiculous to somebody and unrealistic. And so I think validating that and say, okay, can we instead aim for neutrality? And can you accept where you are today and be neutral about it, and look at what does your body do for you? What do you like about your body? Is there any characteristic that you like? Do you like your hair, or your eyes, or that your legs are strong and you can walk 10,000 steps a day, or that your heart pumps without you even having to tell it to, and your lungs breathe in and out, and your cells, stay healthy, and your hair grows, thinking about just how amazing it is that our bodies just function and we don't even really even know what they're doing. Sometimes I think trying to find that sense of awe can help just put it in perspective, that it's not just about what you look like and what size your body is or what shape your body is. It's what does it do for you? Maybe if you've um, if you've had an injury and then your body has healed and you've gone through physical therapy, like remembering that and that accomplishment and that your body was able to heal itself and recover.
Yeah.
And so really trying to flip appearance, focus on appearance to focus on function and bringing in gratitude, and then trying to really nourish your body, not just with your thoughts and how you speak to yourself about your body, but thinking about it in terms of food, like not restricting. If your body feels hungry, let's nourish our bodies. And then let's notice when we feel full and stop, knowing that when we feel hungry, we can eat again because we're not eating by the clock. We're not eating by numbers or macros. We're eating based on our intuition and being in tune with our bodies and responding to that.
Yeah. And do you find when women embark on intuitive eating, they ultimately like eat healthier or more nourishing foods anyway? Or is like, what do you see happening with that?
That's a great question. A lot of people are resistant to intuitive eating in the beginning. So, if your listeners aren't familiar with the book Intuitive Eating, it came out in the 90s. The sixth edition came out, I think, in 2021 or 2022. It's excellent. And there's, I think, 10 principles to intuitive eating. I can't remember exactly how many. But Evelyn Tribole is very kind of anti-diet and anti-weight loss being a goal. And it's more like if you follow these principles, your body will get to its natural state. Maybe weight loss will be a side effect of intuitive eating. Maybe it won't. It depends on the individual. And so for a lot of people, I think if they buy into intuitive eating and they're willing to do it, they might eat lots of stuff that isn't necessarily nourishing to their body. They may eat more like fun foods. I don't like to call them junk foods. I like to call them fun foods. The purpose of them is primarily for pleasure and enjoyment, which is a wonderful thing, but it's not necessarily what we want to eat for 80% of our diet to nourish our bodies and give us energy and fuel and make us feel good. But people may eat a lot of that stuff in the beginning if they've been depriving themselves of it. But eventually they're going to be responding to their body's cues of, oh, I'm craving stuff that really makes me feel good or gives me energy or doesn't make my stomach hurt or make me sleepy. And so theoretically, eventually that evens out and people start craving more nourishing, balanced types of foods. And they're less likely to overindulge in the fun foods because they know they can have the fun foods anytime they want. There's not this Last Supper mentality where they're like, well, I need to have all the ice cream that's left in the freezer because on Monday I'm cutting myself off and I can't have it again for 30 days or whatever. If they're like, no, I can have ice cream whenever I want, you have a little bit, you feel satisfied, you notice in your body that you're feeling good, you put it away. And if you want more the next day, you have more.
Yeah. Do you think that I see this happening with alcohol a lot? Do you think when it comes to, eating and diet culture and all this kind of stuff, do you see like the root issue still going back to the like missing purpose and meaning? Almost like this is the thing I can control and focus on, but because that's lacking in my life. And obviously it doesn't have to be across the board for everybody, but do you see that as common?
That's a really good question. I think possibly yes. Um, I think that sometimes people develop habits and then it's hard to break the habit. Like let's say your habit is that you eat, I don't know, a lot of sugar every single night. And so it might be hard initially to break the habit, but while you're working on changing that behavior and breaking the habit, if you're pouring into yourself and finding what really inspires you and lights you up and gives you a sense of purpose, you're not going to be really thinking about what you're missing out on in terms of only occasionally eating whatever the thing is. So yeah, I think there are some similarities there. As far as the eating disorder treatment community, there's a controversy. Like people, they would say that sugar is not an addictive substance, that it's a food, and we don't want to treat it the same way as addiction. And I can see sides to both issues. I think there's a lot of addictive things about sugar, and maybe it depends on the individual. um, in general, I like to think that all foods can fit and we can listen to our bodies and be intuitive and have flexibility and indulge occasionally and maybe regret it and then begin again.
Yeah. I was thinking of the same thing around like, some people try to compare alcohol to like a food. And like, I don't think of it that way because it's technically a drug, right? It is not in the food group
Yes.
area. But like how much easier it actually is to have a clean kind of demarcation between whether you drink or not, because it's not hidden in all
Yes.
these foods. And, you have to be like a, crazy detective reading stuff to make sure there's not like it's actually so much if you're going to think about eliminating alcohol, almost compared to like any other vice that is like a food more based one, how much actually easier it is because it's like very
Yeah.
obvious what is an alcoholic drink and what's not, whereas like man, that food world, the fake food world obviously is insane and it's a lot to
Yes.
wade through, when you're trying to eat better, but super interesting.
Absolutely. Yes.
And
I
sometimes I
mean,
get
I
on their
know.
shows. Oh, sorry.
Well, I was just going to say, like, the people who have food allergies or food intolerances, like, yes, there are people who need to eliminate certain types of food and food groups. But I typically think it's not a good idea if you're doing it for weight management or body size purposes. I think that, anytime it takes up enough space in your brain that you're preoccupied with it, or you're not going to dinner with your friends, or you're like obsessing over menus before you go to dinner, or you're not going on vacation or whatever, to me, that's like, is it really worth it? Is that really what you want to be using your mental space and energy on?
Yeah. And it goes
And
back to
maybe
what you
there's a way to
shared.
achieve whatever your goal is without having to do all that.
And it goes back to what you shared earlier about like you have all these beautiful gifts that were given to you, and we kind of are wasting them on these little mundane things that at these in the end of life won't really matter too much. And that's just
Yes.
a good way to phrase it. Like the way that I focused on moderating and how much I was drinking, like I could have written so many books.
Yes.
I could have served the world
Well,
in so
and
many
then
ways.
it's like you make a rule with moderation, and then you're like, oh, but I'll do an exception tonight and it'll be this instead, but then I'll go back to that. And it's exhausting, and it sets people up for not being present and for being distracted and then for feeling shame. And yeah, it can be a hell, living hell for people.
Well, switching topics a little bit, you mentioned that you're a 5 on the Enneagram, and I definitely relate most to 3 and 5, and it's really rare to meet other 5s out there. So if anyone doesn't know the Enneagram, the 5 is like the intellectual of the bunch, big learner, loves to just go under the hood and understand how things works, and just wants to be very capable and kind of well knowledge in what they're talking about, obviously, as Jane is.
Yeah.
So I'm super curious, and I know I didn't prepare you for this question, but what have been
Yeah.
some favorite books that you've read over maybe the last like year or two? Like what are just some standout books that you'd love to recommend us today? This is more for
Oh
me than
gosh.
anyone else, but
Yes, that's a great question. So I'm the type of person who gets books and I read bits and pieces, and I have like 5 books that I'm reading at the same time. So one of them is going to be very boring, but it's basically a textbook on rational, it's called RODBT. So it's radically open dialectical behavioral therapy. And it's a book by Thomas Lynch on, it's like this basically therapeutic modality or stance that treats disorders of over control. And typically we hear about I hate the word disorder, but disorders of under control, like addiction and I don't know, kind of extreme behaviors. But we hear less about disorders of over control because they are typically reinforced by our culture. People who overwork, or they're very organized or very meticulous. And what I love about this book that I think everyone can relate to is he has this list of the characteristics of openness. And I've kind of incorporated that into my value system, is like cultivating openness. And some people are naturally more open than others. But even if you're not open, like these individuals with disorders of over control, you can cultivate the state of openness. And so the characteristics of openness, there are things like curiosity in highly novel situations rather than like fear or judgment. Um, Even things like being willing to apologize, or being able to listen and try to understand about opinions and beliefs that are contradictory to your own, and then maybe even incorporating some of those and changing your stance if if they seem reasonable to you. If not, no worries, but you can listen to it and try to understand that person and hear them out. I think being interested in different cultures, wanting to travel, continuous learning, um, playfulness, lightheartedness, all these traits. And so that's something that I love. I also love the Daily Stoic. It's like it's just a daily reading. And I think I've been reading it for several years now because I'll go in spurts and I just kind of read different pages, whatever page it is I read that day. But it starts out with a quote from, Marcus Aurelius or Seneca. And then there's like a little 2-page just discussion of the quote. And I love sleep and I have a hard time waking up in the morning. But if I pop that open on my Kindle app and read it, it kind of wakes me up and gets me going. And then I can wake up and it just kind of gets my head in a good space to start my day.
Yeah. Well, what a better way than like checking email or being woken up to, emergencies and things you have to do really
Yes.
quickly. That's really beautiful. We'll definitely put those books in the show notes. Anything else you wanted to add to that? That sound amazing.
Oh gosh, let me think. Um, well, one of my all-time favorites that I read every few years is Viktor Frankl's Man's Search for Meaning. I think I've mentioned that to you before. But if you are interested in meaning and purpose and this idea of putting things into perspective, um, it's just a beautiful, beautiful account of his experience as a Holocaust survivor and witnessing things that I just can't even imagine. And he talks about how he noticed that when he was a prisoner in these work camps, that, some of his peers, fell into despair and they no longer wanted to go on and they had thoughts of ending their own lives. And then some of his peers, kind of collaborated with the other side and committed acts of cruelty in order to gain power. And then some people just continued to hold on to hope and they found meaning in small acts of connecting with others and showing kindness to others, and it almost kept them alive longer. And to me, that's just so beautiful that people are able, it's such a testament to the human spirit and resilience and grit that some people have. And, it makes me think like, which one would I have been? Like, I don't know. And I don't know if any one of us could know until we're in that type of situation. But it's a hard book to read because it's, there's a lot of really hard things to hear about, but it's also just super inspiring and one of my favorite books of all time. And then in the second half of the book, he presents his theory. He was I believe he was a psychiatrist, and he presents like a theory called logotherapy, and it's all about symbolism and finding meaning and that sort of thing. And if I'm remembering correctly, part of what kept him going was that he had this theory written out in book form with him, and it was destroyed by the Nazis. But he had it in his head, and he needed to survive so that he could then write this theory down and share it with the world. And so I think that also goes to show you, like, finding your purpose and committing to that is extremely powerful.
Yeah. Well, it's such a beautiful book. I love it as well. And, there are studies that show that when you have that purpose, you do live longer, obviously in those horrible situations, but also just as a longevity, measure. It's like ikigai, as the Japanese say. And, sometimes it's a very vague or, term, but I'm so glad we could go deep into like what that means to you in this conversation and what it looks like for your clients, and to be able to really appreciate life and know that you matter in it so much and that you do make a difference in small and big ways. And maybe it's even stepping more into the things that bring you joy and sense of meaning and a sense of service to other people, because to me, you can't even compare the 20-minute buzz you get from alcohol with this life of meaning I've built now. Like, it's just
Absolutely
laughable that
not.
I once thought that fulfilled me, I obviously
Yes.
consciously think that, but in the moment, it was that immediate gratification. And I think that's what's just one of those important things. Maybe not the first step when someone's walking away from an unhealthy or complicated or whatever regular relationship with alcohol. Oftentimes there's some healing and some subconscious work to do around, alcohol itself. But then I think once you're already alcohol free
Absolutely.
for a few months or somewhere on that journey, this is the next step. This is like something to really focus on because then it creates that sustainable alcohol free lifestyle where you're not pining back for, this like immediate gratification. You found the gold, you know? Maybe not
Yes.
every 24/7 you feel that way, but in your heart, you're fulfilled and you have that sense of meaning.
Yes. And I think you know how to get back to it. Like
Yeah.
for me, you were asking like what are my practices? Like if I was going to do a practice, I could like go in my little workout area and put in headset and listen to like meditative music, and I could meditate and play my little sound bowl for a minute and feel rejuvenated. Like finding like what is your 5 or your 10 minute way that you can get back to a centered place where you have perspective. Maybe it's you do 5 minutes of yoga.
Yeah. Well, tell us, Jane, what is next for you? I know you have also, starting to build online offers, and you just hosted a beautiful retreat in Bali. Like, what can we look out for the next year from you? How can people contact you as well?
Yeah, so I am in the process of planning the Bali retreat for 2025. I believe the dates are going to be April 4th through 8th. So stay tuned for more information about that. And then I'm also looking at launching some online group and one-to-one offers for people who want to work on finding their purpose or want to look at their relationship with alcohol or food or their body. And, I would love to answer questions, hear people's comments. They can find me you can find me on Instagram at Jane W. Ballard or on my website, janewballard.com.
Mm. Well, amazing how, like, imagine having such a like intuitive, wise, stoic presence like you, like in your pocket. Who wouldn't want to, talk to you and work with you? Because you do. You have such a like beautiful, calm way of just explaining some of the most beautiful things in life, and also how we can switch our perspective. You're compassionate about the suffering and the hardness of life. Like it's not this like abrupt, jarring kind of like just get over it energy. You embrace that, but
Yeah.
then there's such a beautiful reframe into what really matters. So I'm super excited. Do reach out to Jane. We'll be sure to include all of her contact information in the show notes. I had such a great conversation with you today. I took copious notes on some of these book recommendations. I'll be sure to check them out if I haven't already. Thank you so much for being on the show today.
Thank you, Karolina. It was just such a pleasure.